Made with spoken. Threads of the Heart by Annette Grantham. Digital narration performed by Harlan Briggs. Hume. Elena hunched over her sewing machine, its rhythmic hum filling the air with a soothing cadence. The lavender and cedarwood scent, ever present in her workshop, anchored her, steadying her focus as she completed the last stitches on a quilt. The quilt was more than a work of art. It was a tapestry of memories and emotions, each stitch telling a story. The patches represented different times of her childhood friend Consuela Santiago's life with her late husband. Elena pieced fabric from his favorite shirt throughout the design, alongside hand-stitched words from their love letters and thread-painted petals from Consuela's wedding bouquet. Elena had stitched it with care, each detail chosen to preserve a moment, a memory. When the last stitch of a bright yellow Taino sun symbol in the corner slipped into place, a subtle warmth emanated from the quilt, as if the memories were stirring, seeking to be seen. Elena ran her fingers across the smooth fabric, the magic pulsing beneath her touch. A gentle, bittersweet smile appeared, reflecting the mix of nostalgia and sorrow in her heart. She remembered the day Consuela, the town's only doctor, had come to her, holding a small box of mementos and shaking hands. Raw vulnerability washed over her, causing her hands to tremble and her gaze to drop to the floor. Her words came haltingly, weighed down by the ache of her husband's absence, a loss that expanded on endlessly, swallowing every corner of her life. Elena understood all too well. Losing her parents and later her husband and young daughter had carved similar hollows in her heart. The doorbell tinkled, pulling Elena from her thoughts. Consuela stepped inside, her eyes shadowed with grief. She clutched the brooch at her collar, her fingers trembling over its surface. "Elena," she breathed. "Is it ready?" Elena rose, cradling the folded quilt in her arms. "It's ready," she said, her words carrying the gentle warmth of reassurance, though a heaviness lingered beneath them. She handed the quilt to Consuela, who accepted it as though it were a fragile, precious thing. Consuela's fingers traced the fabric, and a small gasp escaped her lips. Tears welled in her eyes as she pressed the quilt against her chest. "It feels alive," she whispered. "Memories endure," Elena whispered. "Love has a way of surviving, even when the people we cherish are gone." Consuela's gaze met Elena's, and for a moment, her friend's grief lifted, replaced by something softer, almost hopeful. "Thank you," she said, clutching the quilt. "This means everything." As Consuela turned to leave, Elena watched her go, an ache settling in her chest. She understood the depth of Consuela's pain, but a part of her worried. Memories held a potent influence, capable of overwhelming the present with echoes of the past. With every thread of magic she had woven, Elena could only hope the quilt would bring peace. A few days later, Elena was at her counter, setting up a new display of bright thread spools. Mateo, her teenage son, burst through the door, his glasses crooked, and his usually cheerful face lined with worry. "Mama, have you heard?" he asked, a little out of breath. She raised an eyebrow. "Heard what?" "It's Consuela," Mateo said, adjusting his glasses. "She's disappeared." Elena froze. A black spool of thread fell to the counter with a clatter. "What do you mean disappeared?" Mateo leaned closer. "She was crying, wrapped in that quilt you made for her. And then, poof, she was gone. Nobody knows where she went." A chill ran through Elena as she closed her eyes tight and jammed her hands into her armpits. What could have happened? Was it the quilt? "Mama?" Mateo waved a hand in front of her, pulling her back to reality. "You okay?" "You look pretty pale." She forced a smile. "I'm fine, just worried about Consuela." Mateo nodded, but his eyes remained on her, concern etched deep within them. "Do you need company, Mama? I know she is one of your best friends." "That would be nice. Things like this bring up memories." Elena turned to her sewing machine, her mind racing. What if the quilt had done more than offer comfort to Consuela? What if it had somehow drawn her into the very memories Elena had lovingly stitched into it? Was it possible? What had she done? She paced her workshop, thoughts swirling around her. She needed answers to understand what had happened. Stopping at her altar, she noticed the candles casting flickering shadows over old family photos. She touched the cool surface of the table, trying to center herself. Elena turned to her shelves, grabbing a box of fabric scraps. She started with what she knew best, her magic. She would weave another tapestry of Consuela's life and memories, and see if she could uncover any clues about her disappearance. As she began sorting through the fabrics, her heart raced in her chest. She was venturing into unknown territory, exploring her special abilities more deeply than ever before. But she owed it to Consuela. After all, she had given her the quilt, and if it had anything to do with her disappearance, Elena was determined to find out how. Elena spread the fabric scraps across her work table, feeling the edges of each piece with her fingers. As she sorted through the fabrics, her thoughts stitched together the memories they carried. One piece was from Consuela's wedding dress, a silky ivory that sparkled in the light. Another was a fragment of her husband's favorite shirt, a blue cotton that had softened over the years. A pink knit swatch of the blanket they had used to wrap their newborn daughter whispered remnants of that special moment. Elena hummed an old lullaby, the soothing melody helping to ease her frayed nerves. She threaded a silver strand through her sewing machine, a blend of memory and magic. Stitch by stitch, she brought the fabrics together, her fingers guiding the fabric with an ease that was as natural as breathing. As she stitched, the workshop changed. The air grew heavier, the scents of lavender and cedarwood becoming more pronounced. The light filtering from the windows softened, casting a dreamlike glow. Mateo sat in the corner, wide-eyed, as he observed the transformation. "Mama," he whispered. "What's going on?" Elena replied, "I'm reaching out to the memories. They're responding." The first image appeared, a scene from Consuela's wedding day. The sun was setting, bathing the beach in golden hues. Consuela and her husband stood at the water's edge, hands clasped together, gazes locked in the moment of pure love. Joy radiated from that memory, a sweet promise of a future brimming with happiness. She stitched faster as new images came flooding in. Consuela and her husband were in their first little apartment, filled with laughter and dreams. The birth of their daughter, their tiny newborn cradled in her father's arms, with wonder shining in his eyes. A family trip, where they built sandcastles on the beach, joy lighting up their faces. But then, the images took a darker turn. Consuela's husband, frail and pale, lay in a hospital bed. Consuela sat by his side, gripping his hand, tears glistening in her eyes. The funeral followed, with the town gathered in the rain, umbrellas creating a sea of black above the mourners. Elena's hands froze as a lump formed in her throat. The weight of Consuela's grief pressed on her, a pain almost too intense to bear. She glanced at Mateo, whose fists were clenched in response to the emotions swirling around them. "Mama," he whispered, "is this what the quilt did?" With a slight nod, in little more than a whisper, she replied, "I think so. It must have pulled her into these memories, into the past." She resumed stitching, weaving in her strength, her resolve, vowing to find Consuela and bring her back. As she worked, the images shifted again. This time, they depicted the present. Consuela, standing alone in her bedroom, the quilt held close to her chest. The room dissolved into a familiar beach, rich hues of sunset painting the scene. Consuela looked around, a mix of surprise and fear clear in her eyes. Elena leaned in closer, making her stitches smaller, more precise. She found the moment Consuela was drawn into that memory, when the past became more vivid than reality. She saw her friend reach out, hands grasping for something or someone who was no longer there. Then her gaze caught a shadow, a dark presence lurking at the edge of the memory, changing with every blink. This figure embodied grief, a longing to cling to the past, reaching out to Consuela with hands like tendrils of darkness, pulling her further into the memory. Elena's hands shook as she pushed the fabric through, breath quickening. The shadow's power was seductive as it fed on Consuela's grief. After the last stitch, hands trembling, she looked at Mateo. "I know where she is," she said, her heart racing. and I know what I must do to bring her back. Mateo rose, steadfastness set on his face. I'm coming with you, he insisted. You can't face this alone. Elena shook her head. No, mijo. This is my burden. My gift caused this mess, and I need to set things right myself. He reached out, grasping her hand. Please, Mama. You don't need to do this by yourself. Let me help. Warmth flickered through her as she looked at their entwined hands. She knew he was sincere, willing to stand by her side no matter what. But this was her fight, her path. She had to confront the dark side of her magic, the consequences of her actions. She squeezed his hand, but pulled away. Mi tesoro, you need to stay here, she said. Keep the shop open and keep things normal. If anyone asks, just say I'm working on something special, and that I'll be back soon. Although Mateo looked like he wanted to argue, he bit his tongue. Jaw tightened. Fine. But promise me, Mama. Promise you'll come back. A soft smile crossed her face. The shimmer of memories flowed through her. She hugged Mateo. I promise, she said. I'll return, and I'll bring Consuelo with me. Mateo hugged her back and nodded. He stepped behind the front counter, head down. Elena knew the turmoil in his heart, but had to turn back to her quilt. She knew the risks ahead, but she couldn't leave Consuelo trapped in the past, lost in grief's shadow. Elena moved through her workspace with an urgency that bordered on desperation, her hands trembling as she reached for her supplies. Threads in every imaginable shade spilled across the table, each one whispering of emotions of hope, longing, sorrow, and love. She hesitated as she selected the fabrics, her chest tightening when her fingers brushed a piece of her mother's old dress. A scrap from her very first quilt followed, its frayed edge sparking memories of triumph and youthful determination. Finally, she chose a swatch from her late husband's favorite shirt and her daughter's favorite dress, the familiar textures grounding her amidst the storm of her emotions. Her hands lingered over the fabrics, as if sealing a silent vow to pour every ounce of her strength and love into the quilt, no matter the cost. As she worked, the atmosphere in her workshop thickened, the scent of lavender and cedarwood filling the air, as if the room itself were responding to her tenacity. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a gentle glow over the fabrics, making their colors pop with vibrancy. Elena snipped through the fabric with her scissors, the sound satisfying. She hummed an old Puerto Rican lullaby, the familiar tune calming her and connecting her to her roots and ancestry. Every stitch was intentional, a piece of magic woven into the fabric. She stitched in courage with a bright red thread, a tribute to her abuela's indomitable spirit. She threaded resilience with a rich green, echoing the mountain strength surrounding Las Colinas Doradas. A soft pink was stitched in to represent love, reminding her of her mother's warm embrace. The quilt took shape, becoming a vibrant tapestry filled with emotions and memories. With each stitch a growing energy surged through Elena. The quilt pulsed as if alive with power. More than fabric, it became a doorway, a link to where Consuela lingered in shadow. But as the quilt blossomed, so did Elena's uncertainties. A dark figure born from the threads of Consuela's sorrow emerged from the tapestry. Could she confront that darkness? Could she draw Consuela back from its clutches? Tremors ran through her hands as she held the needle tight. A gentle breeze swept through the workshop, carrying a familiar whisper. Her abuela's steady voice cut through the doubt. Fear is only a shadow, mina niña. It holds no sway unless you let it. A deep breath steadied her as Elena thought of Consuela's tear-filled eyes, and her quiet strength. She knew the town relied on Consuela for medical needs. And she thought of her own abilities, the gift she possessed. She couldn't allow fear stopping her. With newfound resolve, she continued working, each stitch growing stronger and more assured. The quilt flourished under her touch, a whirlwind of color and emotion. It became a beacon, a light to cut through the darkness and guide her to bring Consuela home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena secured the last stitch of a green semi-symbol on the corner of the quilt with her machine. She stepped back, admiring the intricate patterns, bright hues, and pulsating magic. She was ready. With care, Elena folded the quilts filled with her memories and Consuela's, her fingers lingering on the soft fabric. She took a calming breath to ground herself before stepping into the night. The streets of Las Colinas Doradas lay serene, their cobblestones glistening under the soft glow of the moonlight. Elena quickened her pace, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the plaza. The trickling fountain of La Dama del Rio cast a long, sorrowful shadow along the river. Elena connected to the legend of love and loss and recognized that tonight, she, too, would confront her own grief she had stuffed away. Approaching Consuela's residence. The grand colonial home loomed silent in the moonlight. Bougainville vines rustled as she neared, their leaves whispering secrets to the night. She pushed the gate open, the iron creaked, a sound that resonated through the deserted garden. Consuela's daughter let her in. Elena's footsteps echoed in the hushed halls. The weight of memories filled the space, blending love and loss. She walked to Consuela's room, her heart racing. The bedroom appeared as she remembered, adorned with photos of Consuela and her husband, their smiles forever captured in time. Standing in the center, her hands clenched around both quilts, she took a steadying breath, preparing for what lay ahead. She unfurled her own quilt, allowing it to cascade to the floor, its magic shimmering in the moonlit room. Elena slipped off her shoes. Stepping onto the quilt, her feet sunk into the soft fabric. She gripped Consuela's quilt, her heart pounding. She closed her eyes. While she focused her intent, will and magic, she searched for the thread connecting this world to the next, a pathway into the memories in the quilt. She found it. A tug, like a hook, caught in her chest. She gasped as her eyes snapped open. The room melted away into a kaleidoscope of vibrant, shifting hues. Twisting shapes blurred together to form a turbulent whirlwind that swallowed her whole. Elena spiraled as the ground vanished. Through it all, she clung to her friend's quilt, its familiar texture a steady anchor amid the swirling chaos. Then the storm ceased. Swirling hues stilled, faded, and gave way to solid ground beneath her feet. The air carried the faint scent of salt and flowers. The quilts were still there, but the world around her had transformed into something unfamiliar. Heart racing, she surveyed her surroundings. A beach stretched out before her, the sun setting in gold hues as waves kissed the shore. This was the beach from Consuela's memories, where joyful moments had been shared with her husband and daughter. But something felt off. Colors were muted, shapes bleary, as if the memory had distorted. Shadows flickered and wiggled, edges blurred, and at the beach's edge, a shadowy figure loomed. Elena had to navigate through this to confront the shadows, delve deep into Consuela's memories, and bring her back to the light. Elena needed to locate Consuela. As Elena stepped off her quilt, her feet sunk into the soft warm sand, as her gaze swept the shoreline. The shadow pulsed at the edges of her vision, flickering and twisting like smoke caught in an unseen wind. It stretched and recoiled, its movements deliberate, as if testing its reach. The air hummed with intensity. She shivered, the weight of its presence pressed against her senses, a silent promise of its growing power. Conviction rose in Elena's chest like a tide, propelling her forward. She walked toward the sandcastles in the distance, her fists clenched, lips pressed together. She would find her friend and bring her home. Memories swirled around her, the scenery bending and blending. A wedding unfolded on the beach. Consuela and her husband stood hand in hand under an arbor, their smiles radiant with love. Elena remembered that day as Consuela's maid of honor. The image shifted to newlyweds in a modest apartment, laughter echoing as they danced in the kitchen. Another scene followed. A sunny day, the couple building sandcastles with their young daughter, their joy shimmering like sunlight on the waves. Elena's throat tightened. The warmth of these moments mirrored pieces of her own past, memories she kept locked away. Days when her life had been filled with love and laughter, before her loss, before the hurricane. But those were only fragments of her story, just as these were fragments of Consuela's. At the edges of the light, the shadows stirred. Consuela's husband appeared pale and frail, confined to a hospital bed. Consuela sat beside him, clutching his hand, her silent tears falling like rain. A funeral emerged, a sea of umbrellas under a gray sky, the air heavy with mourning. The grief pressed on Elena, sharp and familiar. pulling at her like an old wound from her own tragedies. The shadow thickened, encircling the memories like a suffocating mist. Elena's chest tightened, her breath hitched. These weren't only memories, they were traps, weaving pain into a cocoon. She couldn't let them ensnare her too. Elena's chest pinched from the unbearable weight of Consuela's grief. But she continued, her will unyielding. She had to find Consuela. She needed to bring her back. And then, she spotted her. Consuela stood at the water's edge, her silhouette framed by the dying light on the horizon. She clutched her quilt as though it were the only thing tethering her to existence, her fingers trembling against the fabric. The faint crash of waves filled the silence, punctuated by her uneven breaths. Elena approached, the sand firmer beneath her feet. The memory seemed to hold its breath, the usual rhythm of the sea slowing to a hushed murmur. As she neared, she caught the quiver of Consuela's shoulders. Anguish radiated from her. "Consuela," Elena called, cutting through the fragile air. Her friend turned, her eyes brimmed with tears, their depths reflecting both the afterglow of the sunset and an unspoken ache. "Elena," she whispered, her sound breaking like a fragile thread. "How did you find me?" "I followed your memories," Elena replied, stepping closer. Consuela's gaze dropped to the quilt in her hands, tracing its intricate patterns with trembling fingers. "It feels so real," she murmured. "I can feel him here, his love, his presence, as if he's still with me before he got sick." Elena's heart ached at the raw yearning in her words. "Consuela," she said, placing a steadying hand on her arm. "He's gone. This place is a reflection, a fragment of what you hold in your heart. But it isn't where you belong. You have your daughter." Tears slipped down Consuela's cheeks as her grip tightened on the quilt, her knuckles white against the fabric. "I can't leave him again," she choked. "I can't face that pain, that emptiness, not again." A chill ran through Elena as the air thickened, the shadow at the beach's edge coiling into sharper focus. It seemed to pulse with Consuela's grief, feeding and building strength from her despair. The pull was stronger now, insidious and relentless. "Consuela, listen to me," Elena urged, grabbing her friend's shoulders. Their gazes locked, and in the depths of Consuela's eyes, she saw the fragile thread of resistance weakening. "It may feel safe, but it's not real. And it's not the life waiting for you." The shadow stirred, its form twisting as though alive. A gust of cold air swept past, carrying whispers that teased at Elena's resolve. The tendrils of the shadow stretched toward Consuela, caressing her grief like a lover's touch. Then it spoke, low, tender, and familiar. "Stay with me, my love," it implored. "Here, we can be together forever." Consuela gasped, the sound fractured, her grip on her quilt frantic. Her breath hitched as her knees wavered, her resolve crumbling under the weight of longing. "No." Elena stepped between them, spreading her arms wide as if shielding her friend from the shadow's reach. "You're not her husband. You're a lie. A shadow of her grief. You're not real." The shadow flinched, but its voice grew venomous. "I am real," it hissed. "I am her peace, her love, and what she longs for." Elena stood her ground. "No, you're her sorrow, her pain, a ghost of what she must release. You can't hold her here." The shadow writhed, the air heavy with its desperation. The beach blurred, shifting into the storm-torn night Elena had tried to forget, the hurricane tearing her house apart, the wind screaming as her husband and daughter were swept from her life. She forced herself to breathe through the pain, as the image pierced her, sharp and unrelenting. Her fists tightened, nails digging into her palms. "No, you won't use my loss against me." She straightened, planting her feet as if anchoring herself against the storm. "I won't let you." The words burned in her chest, her grief twisting into unshakable resolve. The shadow's edges frayed like torn fabric, its strength wavered. She turned to Consuela. "You have to let him go, Consuela. Step away from the past and embrace your life with your daughter and your patience." Her friend's lips parted, her breaths shallow, her tear-filled eyes darting between Elena and the shadow. A single trembling breath escaped her, followed by the softest of whispers. I can't lose him again. You're not losing him, Elena said. You carry him with you. In your heart, in your memories. You can't stay here. This isn't living. Consuela reached out to the shadow, her hand stirring the shadow's edges. Consuela's grip on the quilt faltered. Her tears fell as she looked at Elena, then back at the shadow. The tendril hovered, trembling as though awaiting her choice. With a rasping breath, she released the quilt, letting it drop to the sand. Her hand fell to her side, and with it, the shadow let out a piercing cry, unraveling into wisps that dissolved into the air. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Consuela turned to Elena, her expression a mix of heartbreak and relief. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not letting me stay. She glanced back at the quilt that the incoming tide pushed and pulled. Elena took her hand, offering a small, steadying smile. You're stronger than you know, Consuela. Let's go home. The horizon's golden hues dimmed as the memory dissolved. The beach, and its whispers fading into the quiet comfort of reality. Together, they stepped forward, leaving their memories behind. In Consuela's bedroom, they stood on Elena's quilt, the moonlight illuminating the cheerful photographs on the walls. As Consuela looked around, relief washed over her face. Elena turned to her, gentle, yet firm. You're home, Consuela, she said. You're back where you truly belong. Elena handed her the new quilt she made to find her. Her friend nodded, tears welling in her eyes, filled with gratitude as she took the quilt. Thank you, Elena, she whispered. Thank you for guiding me back, for helping me find my way again. Elena smiled, reaching out to embrace Consuela. It's my honor, she replied. It was my duty, as your friend. You're not alone, Consuela. You never were, and you never will be. She stood back, still holding Consuela's hand. After they stepped off Elena's quilt, she folded it, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns that had represented her own journey. Consuela touched the brooch at her collar, a token of her strength. I can't change what's happened, she told Elena. But I can honor my past by fully living in the present, and serving my community with the love and dedication my husband and I shared. Elena nodded with a gentle smile. Exactly, Consuela. Your strength is rooted in your memories, but what truly matters is how you choose to move forward. With renewed confidence, Consuela took a deep breath, her posture straightening as if preparing to tackle a new challenge. The town needs to know I'm back, and ready to serve them again. Elena's heart swelled with pride for her friend. They will be delighted to see you, Consuela. You are a beacon of hope for Las Colinas Doradas. Consuela took Elena's hand. I'll walk back to your workshop with you. I want some fresh air. The hallway of Consuela's home echoed with their footsteps, as if the house itself breathed easier, finally welcoming its mistress home. In the moonlit garden, the ferns and orchids rustled, as if sharing secrets with the night. Once they reached the workshop, Elena pushed the door open, the soothing scent of lavender and cedarwood wrapping around them like an embrace. She led Consuela to her small altar in the corner, where candles flickered, illuminating photos of her ancestors. Her gaze lingered on the photo of her husband and daughter. I want to thank you, Elena, Consuela said. You've given me more than a quilt. You've given me hope, courage, and a renewed purpose. Elena smiled, the warm candlelight reflecting in her eyes. It was my gift to you. But it was also a learning experience for me. I've learned to trust my magic and embrace its true potential. Consuela grasped Elena's hand. You have an incredible gift. Never doubt it. The world truly needs your magic, your heart. Warmth and empowerment surged through Elena. She'd continue threading her magic into her quilts, offering solace and healing to those in need. But more importantly, she'd approach her gift with a deeper understanding and a readiness to face whatever challenges might arise. As Consuela prepared to leave, she turned to Elena once more. Promise me, she said. Promise you'll never stop sowing your magic. But maybe only happy memories. She winked. Elena's throat tightened. But she held Consuela's gaze and managed a small, steady smile. Promise. I won't ever stop stitching my magic. I'll leave out the shadows, the sorrow, and grief. Only joy, love, and laughter. Her fingers grazed the edge of the quilt, its intricate stitches sparking memories of her happiest times. She pictured her mother teaching her how to sew, their laughter echoing in the kitchen, while thread and fabric meshed between her fingers. She remembered her father's warm and encouraging voice, praising her first completed quilt. And her husband's easy smile, as he teased her about the endless hours she spent stitching. The way he would wrap her quilts around his shoulders on chilly nights, like a cloak made of love. The ache in her chest faded. Elena took a deep breath, allowing the burden of past losses to slip away. She nodded. I'll stitch the light, for everyone who needs it. With a last squeeze of their hands, Consuela stepped out. The soft tinkle of the bell rang in the night. Elena watched her go, her heart filled with peace and purpose. She faced her fears, delved deeper into her magic, and emerged stronger, more assured, and ready for the future. Too worked up to sleep, Elena returned to her table, gathering fabrics for a new quilt while humming an old Puerto Rican lullaby. The melody grounded her, connected her with her ancestors and heritage. As she threaded the needle, the familiar pulse of magic flowed through her.
For much of my life, I've survived in silence. I carry with me the trauma of childhood abuse and assault, wounds that left deep, tangled roots. For years, I searched for healing in quiet ways in places where words failed me, and I found it stitch by stitch in craft. Quilting, writing, creating with my hands, these became the languages I could trust. They allowed me to piece together what had been broken, not perfectly, but truthfully. Threads of the Heart was born from that place of longing and repair. The main character, Elena, is a Puerto Rican quilter whose magic allows her to weave memories into cloth. When she gives a grief-stricken friend a quilt made from her late husband's belongings, the quilt becomes a portal, literally. The friend vanishes into her own memories, and Elena must follow her into the heart of that grief to bring her back. It's a story about loss, about love, and most of all, about returning to oneself after being lost to pain. That's what I've had to do in my life. In writing this, I also touched something new inside myself. Late in life, I discovered that I'm part Puerto Rican. It hit me harder than I expected. I realized how much I had been lost, not just language and place, but belonging. Was an ache I hadn't named, one that came from being severed from an identity that should have been mine. This story let me begin to reclaim that thread, honoring what I didn't get to grow up with and giving it space in my creative world. Elena's story let me explore grief, not as something to move past, but something to walk through. Like Elena, I've known the weight of absence, the ache of losing people who should have stayed. I've known what it means to clutch onto what remains and try to find meaning in it. I've learned that sometimes memory is both the wound and the balm. Through this story, I could say things I haven't always been able to voice aloud. I set the story in a fictional Puerto Rican town because I wanted to give shape to a place I wished I'd known. The Teano sun symbol on the quilt is my small tribute to ancestors I've only begun to understand. Writing this wasn't just about storytelling. It was an act of reconnection, of saying, I see you now, I carry you forward. I believe deeply in the quiet power of craft. It's how many of us survive. Whether we quilt or paint or write, creation gives us control over what has hurt us. It gives shape to our pain and turns it into something meaningful. That's what I hope this story offers to others, the sense that we can mend what was broken, even if it doesn't look like it did before. This isn't just a story about a magical quilt. It's about how we carry those we've lost. It's about how grief, if listened to gently, can lead us home. It's about the resilience of women who stitch love into every scene, even when the world has tried to unravel them.
Professional audiobooks in a click. Spoken.